A.H. Archibald Hapwood Brubaker lived in a house of bones. Jawbones, hip bones, femurs. There were bones in every room, every closet on the back porch. Some people have stone cats on their roof. On his roof, Archie Brubaker had a skeleton of Monroe, his deceased Siamese. Take a seat in his bathroom and you found yourself facing the faintly smirking skull of Doris, a prehistoric creodont. Open the kitchen cabinet where the peanut butter was kept, and you were face to face with an extinct fox. Archie was not morbid, he was a paleontologist. The bones were from digs he had done throughout the American West. Many were rightfully his, found in his spare time. Others he collected from museums, but slipped into his own pocket or knapsack and said, "Better to sit in my refrigerator than disappear in a drawer in some museum basement," he would say. When he wasn't digging up old bones, Archie Brubaker was teaching at universities in the East. He retired at the age of 65. When he was 65, his wife, Ada May, died. At 67, he moved himself and his bones west to join the other fossils, he said. He chose his home for two reasons. One, its proximity to the high school. He wanted to be near kids, as he had none of his own. And two, Senor Saguaro. Senor Saguaro was a cactus, a 30-foot tall giant that towered over the tool shed in the backyard. It had two arms on the trunk. One struck straight out, and the other made a right turn upwards, as if waving adios. The waving arm was green from the elbow up. All else was brown, dead. Much of the thick, leathery skin along the trunk had come loose and crumpled in a heap around the massive foot. Senor Saguaro had lost his pants. Only his ribs, thumb-thick vertical timbers, held him up. Elf owls nested in his chest. The old professor often talked to Senor Saguaro, and to us. He was not certified to teach in Arizona, but that did not stop him. Every Saturday morning, his house became a school. 4th graders, 12th graders, all were welcome. No tests, no grades, no attendance record, just the best school most of us had ever gone to. He covered everything from toothpaste to tapeworms and somehow made all fit. He called us the Loyal Order of the Stone Bone. He gave us homemade necklaces. The pendant was a small fossil bone strung on rawhide. Years before, he had told his first class, "Call me Archie." He never had to say it again. After dinner that day, Kevin and I walked over to Archie's. Though the official class convened on Saturday morning, kids were welcome anytime. "My school," he said, "is everywhere and always in session." We found him as usual on the back porch, rocking and reading. The porch, bathed in the red gold light of sunset, faced the Maricopas. Archie's white hair seemed to give off a light of its own. The moment he saw us, he put down his book. "Students, welcome." "Archie," we said, and then turned to greet the great cactus, as visitors were expected to do. "Senor Saguaro," we saluted. We sat on rockers. The porch was full of them. "So, men," he'd said, "business or pleasure?" "Bafflement," I said. There's a new girl in school." He laughed. "Stargirl." Kevin's eyes popped open. "You know her?" "Know her," he said. He picked up his pipe and loaded it with cherry sweet tobacco. He always did this when settling in for a long lecture or conversation. "Good question." He lit the pipe. "Let's say she's been on the porch here quite a few times." White smoke puffed like Apache signals from the corner of his mouth. "I was wondering if you'd start asking questions," he chuckled to himself. "Bafflement. Good word. She is different, isn't she?" Kevin and I burst into laughter and nods. At that moment, I realized how much I'd been craving Archie's confirmation. Kevin exclaimed, "Like another species." Archie cocked his head as if he had just caught the sound of a rare bird. The pipe stem anchored a wry grin. A sweet scent filled the air about our rocking chairs. He stared at Kevin. "On the contrary, she is one of us, most decidedly. She is more than we are us. She is, I think, who we really are, or were." Archie talked that way sometimes, in riddles. We didn't always know what he was saying, but our ears didn't much care. We just wanted to hear more. As the sun dipped below the mountains, it fired a final dart at Archie's flashing eyebrows. "She's homeschooled, you know. Her mother brought her to me. I guess she wanted a break from playing teacher. 1 day a week, 4, 5, yes, 5 years now. Kevin pointed. You created her. Archie smiled, puffed. No, that was done long before me. Some people are saying she's kind of an alien sent down here from Alpha Centauri or something, said Kevin. He chuckled, but not too convincingly. He half believed it. Archie's pipe had gone out. He relit it. She's anything but. She's an earthling if there ever was one. So it's not just an act, said Kevin. An act? No. If she is acting, or if anybody is acting, it is us. She's as real as... He looked around. He picked up the tiny wedge-like skull of Barney, a 60-million-year-old Paleocene rodent, and held it up. As real as Barney. I felt a little jolt of pride at having reached this conclusion myself. But the name, said Kevin, leaning forward, is it real? The name, Archie shrugged. Every name is real. That's the nature of names. When she first showed up, she called herself Pocket Mouse, then Mud Pie, then what? Hully-Gully, I believe. Now, Stargirl. The word came out whispery. My throat was dry. Archie looked at me. Whatever strikes her fancy. Maybe that's how names ought to be, huh? Why be stuck with just one your whole life? What about our parents, said Kevin. What about them? What do they think? Archie shrugged. I guess they agree. What do they do, Kevin said. Breathe, eat, clip their toenails. Kevin laughed. You know what I mean. Where do they work? Mrs. Carraway, until a few months ago, was Stargirl's teacher. I understand she also makes costumes for movies. Kevin poked me. The crazy clothes. Her father, Charles, works. He smiled at us. Where else? Mechatronics, we said in a chorus. I said it with wonder, for I'd imagined something more exotic. Kevin said, so where is she from? A natural question in a city as young as Micah. Nearly everyone had been born somewhere else. Archie's eyebrows went up. Good question. He took a long pull on the pipe. Some would say Minnesota, but in her case, he let out the smoke, his face disappearing in a gray cloud. A sweet haze veiled the sunset, cherries roasting in the Maricopas. He whispered, Rara avis. Archie, said Kevin, you're not making a lot of sense. Archie laughed. He said, do I ever? Kevin jumped up. I want to put her on hot seat. Dorco Borlaug here doesn't want to. Archie studied me through the smoke. I thought I saw approval, but when he smoked, he merely said, work it out, men. We talked until dark. We said adios to Senor Saguaro. On our way out, Archie said more to me than to Kevin. I thought, you'll know her more by your questions than by her answers. Keep looking at her long enough. One day you might see someone you know. The change began around Thanksgiving. By December 1st, Stargirl Caraway had become the most popular person in school. How did it happen? Was it the cheerleading? The last football game of the season was her first as a cheerleader. The grandstand was packed. Students, parents, alumni. Never had so many people come to a football game to see a cheerleader. She did all the regular cheers and routines, and more. In fact, she never stopped cheering. While the other girls were taking breaks, she went on jumping and yelling. She roamed areas that had always been ignored, the far ends of the grandstand, the spectators behind the goalpost, the snack bar parents, found themselves with their own arm-pumping cheerleader. She ran straight across the 50-yard line and joined the other team's cheerleaders. We laughed as they stood there with their mouths open. She cheered in front of the players' bench and was shooed away by a coach. At halftime, she played her ukulele with the band. In the second half, she got acrobatic. She did cartwheels and backflips. At one point, the game was stopped and 3 zebra shirt officials ran towards one end zone. She had shinnied up a goalpost, tightrope walked out to the middle of the crossbar, and was now standing there with her arms raised in a touchdown sign. She was commanded down to a standing ovation and flashing cameras. As we filed out afterwards, no one mentioned how boring the game itself had been. No one cared that the Electrons had lost again. In this column next day, the sports editor of the Micah Times referred to her as the best athlete on the field. We couldn't wait for basketball season. Was it a Hillary Kimball backlash? Several days after the birthday song, I heard a shout down the hallway. Don't. I ran. A crowd was gathered at the top of a stairwell. They were all staring at something. I pushed my way through. Hillary Kimball was standing at the upper landing, grinning. She was holding Cinnamon, the rat, dangling by its tail over the railing, nothing but space between it and the floor. Stargirl was on the steps below, looking up. The scene froze. The bell for the next class rang. Nobody moved. Stargirl said nothing, merely looked. The 8 toes of Cinnamon's front paws splayed apart. Its tiny, unblinking eyes were bulging, black as cloves. Again a voice rang out. "Don't, Hillary." Suddenly, Hillary dropped it. Someone screamed, but the rat fell only on the floor at Hillary's feet. She sent Stargirl a final sneer and left. Was it Dory Dilson? Dory Dilson was a brown-haired 9th grader who wrote poems in a loose-leaf notebook half as big as herself, and whose name nobody knew until the day she sat down at Stargirl's table for lunch. Next day, the table was full. No longer did Stargirl eat lunch, or walk the hallways, or do anything else at school alone. Was it us? Did we change? Why didn't Hillary Kimball drop the rat to its death? Did she see something in our eyes? Whatever the reason, by the time we returned from Thanksgiving break, it was clear that the change had occurred. Suddenly, Stargirl was not dangerous, and we rushed to embrace her. Calls of Stargirl flew down the hallways. We couldn't say her name often enough. It tickled us to mention her name to strangers and watch the expressions on their faces. Girls liked her, boys liked her, and most remarkable, the attention came from all kinds of kids. Shy mice and princesses, jocks and eggheads. We honored her by imitation. A chorus of ukuleles strummed in the lunchroom. Flowers appeared on classroom desks. One day it rained and a dozen girls ran outside to dance. The pet shop at the Micah Mall ran out of rats. The best chance for us to express our admiration came in the first week of December. We were gathered in the auditorium for the annual oratorical contest, sponsored by the Arizona League of Women Voters. The event was open to any high school student who cared to show off his or her stuff as a public speaker. The microphone was yours for 7 minutes. Talk about anything you'd like. The winner would move to the district competition. Usually, only 4 or 5 students entered the contest at MAHS. That year, there were 13, including Stargirl. You didn't have to be a judge to see that she was far and away the best. She gave an animated speech, a performance really, titled "Elf Owl, Call Me By My First Name." Her gray-brown homesteader's dress was the color of her subject. I couldn't see her freckles from the audience, but I imagined them dancing on her nose as she flicked her head this way and that. When she finished, we stomped on the floor and whistled and shouted for more. While the judges went through the charade of conferring, a film was shown. It was a brief documentary about the previous year's state finals. It featured the winner, a boy from Yuma. The most riveting moments of the film came not during the contest, but during its aftermath. When the boy arrived back at Yuma High, the whole school mobbed him in the parking lot. Banners, cheerleaders, band music, confetti, streamers. Pumping his arms in the air, the returning hero rode their shoulders into school. The film ended, and the lights went on, and the judges proclaimed Stargirl the winner. She would now go on to the district competition in Red Rock, they said. The state finals would be held in Phoenix in April. Again and again, we whooped and whistled. Such was the acclamation we gave her in those last weeks of the year, but we also gave something to ourselves.